Hi everyone, thanks for joining us here today. I'm Vincent Savio here with managing partner Jim Bode, and we're excited for you all to join us.
So I was recently looking at a report that was created by Vanguard that did a study on wealth and wealth transfers. And one of the reports was saying that 70% of people that have wealth to pass on to the next generation, by the time the second generation is done, that wealth is gone. And the question that I have is, well, why? Right? And so when we talk about that, and I'm going to throw this back to you, Vinny, is why do you think that most wealth doesn't make it through two generations?
I think it's because there's not a lot of communication between generations of how they built their wealth, how to sustain it, who they're working with, and creating a plan of how they're going to make that last for the next 40, 50 years.
Yeah, and sometimes we're talking about multiple millions of dollars. We're not talking about, hey, I've just passed on $100,000. And a lot of these cases that Vanguard did in their study, they're looking at families that are passing on substantial wealth. And I think you're right. I think a lot of it comes down to education. I think a lot of it comes down to, does that second generation, number one, understand what savings and wealth really is? And are they doing anything about it? And as advisors and as a company, what are we doing about it to make sure that that next generation really understands what the value of this money is and how to make it last even longer than two generations?
I think that's a fun part of this discussion today, where instead of being parents who are worrying about what they're going to leave their kids behind, when do we really start having the conversation of how to help them build their own wealth? And then how do they accept the responsibility of any inheritance in the future?
So when should we have that conversation with clients, right? If we know that there's an issue, what are we doing to solve for it? And when is that right age that we start talking about saving and investing and planning, not just for our current clients, but specifically for that next generation?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of questions that are out there, and the truth is it's never too early to start planning. We see a lot of new parents who are having newborns and they want to put their kids in the best case scenario right away, and how do we start saving for college and everything else under the sun to give them the best life possible. But just saving for them isn't really answering the question. It's how we're going to continue to educate them and raise them through their teenage years, through college, into their first job, so their money habits are strong and they know the discipline of saving early. So it's never too early to start having a conversation with your advisor and starting to earn a plan. But I think today we want to specifically talk about, as our kids are starting to get jobs, earning money of their own, what habits, what accounts, what can they be doing? And truly, what does that end result look like with compound interest?
Yeah, I think what might be helpful now is, I love telling people about what I'm doing personally, right? As the owner of an investment firm, it's like, well, what are you doing for your kids? And I think what might be great is then take it to an example of what some of our clients are doing.
Sure.
So personally, as it stands right now, I have a 19-year-old, a 16-year-old, and a 12-year-old. And they're all very different, and they have different personalities. But the one thing that my wife and I, Krista, did very young is we opened up a small investment account for them. And it wasn't anything other than for them to see how the markets move. They don't necessarily need to understand what's causing the markets to go up and down, but I wanted them to get the idea of, hey, if I open up an app on my phone and I see that I own these 3 or 4 companies, I'm going to start understanding what's happening with money. So at a young age, I want to say probably 10 years ago, Krista and I opened up just regular investment accounts in our name that we gave our kids access to, with something like $200 or $300 each, just so that they can understand what's happening with their investments. And we slowly started adding to it. When they got money, they started adding to it. We called it the investment tax. So they saved a little bit into their savings account. Mom and dad saved a little bit, so they had a little bit of a vested interest for them to go forward. And they have input on the investments that we buy. Right, I show them a list of companies that they can look at, they can pick from, and when it's time to make changes, we help them understand why we're making those changes. So for me, it wasn't necessarily an introduction of financial planning, but it was an introduction of, well, I do need to save, and there's a way that I can invest in something that is going to have a long-term impact as those accounts change. So that's what I did for my 3 kids. And as they got older, and we'll talk about a little bit further on, when they started working, we've made changes to some of those goals. So that's what I'm doing personally for my kids. And Vinny, I know that you've been working with a couple of families and a couple of clients specifically for them. Why don't you share a little bit on what you've done and help them set up for their kids?
Sure. So a great set of clients who have some older kids, one in college, one is graduating high school pretty soon, but both are working. So the question came up, what should they be doing? And this really opened the doors to show them and their kids, because we met with them directly, to take them through their goals, their planning, and then teach them a little bit about the investments without overwhelming them right away. You don't want to turn this off. A lot of times this seems confusing at a high level for a lot of people. So we're trying to make it as easy, as fun. But I like to show them the path at the end, because sometimes it doesn't seem like a little today is going to be a lot tomorrow.
So you want to show them projections into the future.
Right.
I love that.
So what we decided to do was, because both kids are working, we were going to open up a Roth account, okay, for each one. So for those of you who don't know, the difference between a traditional IRA and a Roth, traditional will grow tax deferred, but when you start taking the money out, you'll pay taxes at that time. The Roth, however, you pay taxes today and it will grow tax free. And when you go and take that money out after the ages of 59 and a half or older, all the money is yours. So when you start that much earlier, the feature of compound rate of return will be that much greater over that length of time. So each of the kids, again, both teenagers but working, started with $500. Okay. Each have made the goal of saving about $200 a month.
Okay.
Which is a great savings goal for sure. Over 45 years, if you look at an average rate of return, and I like to look at a couple different numbers here, but over the last 50 years, S&P 500 alone has returned greater than about 10%. So if we use 10% as a baseline, starting at $500 today, $200 on a monthly, over 45 years, gets us to about $1.7 million. Go a little bit higher than that, obviously the return's that much greater. If we bring it down to 8%, it's still north of $900,000. And that's before the kids have graduated, got their full-time jobs, started really their prime earning years. Just on this habit alone sets them up to be millionaires.
So what we've done in that example is you're basically saving $2,400 a year, right? Starting with $500 and over 45 years, not thinking about any other money that they're saving, just in this Roth IRA. They're going to have, just for round numbers' sake, around $1 million of tax-free growth and tax-free distributions. Remarkable.
Right.
Really is remarkable. And when you say the word custodial, can you kind of dive into what that means? Because obviously these are minors that you've opened up these accounts for.
Sure. So one is over the age of 18, so he opened up his own Roth because his sibling is under the age of 18. A parent signs off as the guardian to give permission that money can go in and out of this account. It's just a way to add a layer of supervision onto the account for the child until they become an adult.
Yeah, and it is a Roth IRA, so there are rules around what we can contribute. And for a minor working, they can contribute up to $7,500. If they're not making that, in other words, if they only made $5,000, they can save $5,000 into that account. So any earned income that they want. But for the example you gave, they were saving $2,400 a year. And that amount grew to $1 million. And I think for a kid at the age of 16 or 18 to have that vision of, I'm going to be a millionaire someday, that's pretty awesome.
I think it's a huge credit to the parents, right? I think back when I was a kid and I made a little bit of money, I would go out, spend it with my friends, look at every way that I just, I got a little bit and I just went out and did it. But instead of forming really good habits, as these parents are trying to pass on to their kids, because they look at their retirement today and they're, earning good money, they're saving along, and they're eyeing retirement, instead of the focus on maybe what do I have to leave my kids to make them okay?
Yeah.
What habits can we teach them today so they can build their own wealth?
Yeah.
And so that way you're looking down the line where they're not as scared about dipping in for long term, or maybe there's travel, or maybe there's just ways they want to live their life, and they don't feel the stress or the burden of, well, we're not leaving our kids as much as we thought we were.
Yeah, and I also think from a parent standpoint, when I think about my kids, knowing that we're setting them up to be successful in the future, that's what we're trying to do, right? We think about that Vanguard report, and if we can set that next generation up with the proper skills and savings and planning, it's going to make any inheritance that they get or anything that they're doing for themselves be a lot more meaningful to them. So when I think of my kids again and what we've done is we've set my oldest son up in particular with a Roth IRA. And for him, he has complete control. He's over 18 years of age. It is a Roth IRA that he has. And I think the first year that he opened it, I believe he started with roughly $6,000. And I remember looking at his account at the end of the first year, and he was like, "Dad, it's up 10%. I made $600 this year. That doesn't feel like that much." And then he made another contribution into his account. And then he had another good year. And all of a sudden, that $600 return turned into $1,200 because things are starting to grow and move a lot faster. And in front of his eyes, he saw the power of compounding. He saw the power of savings. And it's changed his view on, hey, do I want to go out and hang out with my buddies after one of my classes or on break, to, hey, I need to get some more money into this account so I can keep it growing because now my money's working for me. And it's going to be a lot larger in 10, 15, 20 years. And in his eyes, it's really exciting to see how that makes sense to him. And starting at a young age and creating those habits, there is no doubt in my mind that he's going to continue saving well into the future. And there was another report that I recently saw, we recently looked at, that said what the average age that someone actually starts saving. And love for you to talk a little bit about that, Vinny.
Yeah, so the average age has come out to be anywhere between 27 and 33 years old. And I think that makes a lot of sense because so many of us, when we get our first jobs, we're still not making the money we obviously want to be making, and we are living more paycheck to paycheck, or we're paying off student loans or past debt, and we're really trying to find our bearings. And a lot of times, it's not the long-term vision that sets our budget. Instead, we're reacting to the short-term debts that are around us and what we can do, where we can go, how we can have some fun, enjoy ourselves. So we put off that piece of our plan or process where we should be saving because we don't really know what to do. And there's not a lot of education behind it when you go to a lot of these companies. Yes, they give you the pamphlet, or you can sit down with HR or whoever, and maybe you set something up, or maybe you don't, but they don't really do a good job of educating you of what can be. Or people look at it and say, you know what, I'll start this next year at my next raise. And so I think what we're finding as we have this discussion, or in your own experiences when we talk to clients, is the fact that how amazing is it that this couple in particular that we're mentioning here gave their kids a 10, 15-year head start.
And that's what we're trying to create. We're trying to look at that next generation and say, oh man, I wish my parents taught me earlier. I want all of our clients to have that conversation with their kids today that we can be included in, that just starts creating healthy habits around saving and investing. And we're trying to be, as a company, really intentional about this.
Yeah, I think we want to just be open and available to those conversations, because we're going to see questions out there, and I know we have questions come in now that are asking, well, from a tax perspective, you know, what is the best situation to put our kids in or put myself in? And the truth is that there's layers here and nuances for every individual situation. So really, it's having a discussion with your advisor, laying out what you really want your goals to be, and then looking at the different alternatives, at the types of accounts, whether you're getting an estate plan involved, and really how you want this money to either be taken care of, inherited, or built over X amount of time. So I think having that discussion, it's never too early. And even if you feel like you're on the backside of it, bring your family in now, because you're going to start to create those better habits for your grandkids if your kids can now start teaching them about the money.
Yeah, so Vinny and I have been on a campaign with all of Beck, Bode, and we talk a lot about legacy planning and passing money on to that next generation. And it's becoming a really meaningful part of our practice, because for Vinny and I, we have kids that are the ages of many of the ones that we're talking to. And we love having those conversations with them to start that educational process. So we're encouraging all of our clients, whether they have kids or grandkids that they want to start creating healthy habits for, to introduce us to them. And we have the dialogue with the parents and the grandparents to make it a very comfortable and informed decision. And we reflect on my parents and that generation. Money was a secret. Nobody wanted anybody to know how much money they were saving. And I think nowadays we're trying to break that, where we don't need to have our clients know exactly how much money, or their next generation know exactly how much money they have, but we want them to be part of the process of saving and understanding what's happening with the money. And when they get to a certain age, we do want to talk about it. We do want that next generation to understand what that inheritance is, and making it meaningful for them and making that part of our planning conversations. So that continued dialogue is what we're working towards at Beck Bode.
And if you think about it, if you're one of the parents out there that haven't had a conversation with older kids, let's say they're parents of themselves at this point, looking at maybe it is a little too late or we're uncomfortable them knowing exactly what we have. The truth is you think about how they're going to feel if they inherit this amount of wealth at some point or this responsibility and they don't know how to navigate it. So having the conversation with them at any point is only going to ease that tension or anxiety for them to make good decisions, and maybe you can have some input along the way to guide them to make the decisions that are important to you too, so they know how to take care of their kids from your wishes. So
yeah, going back to that Vanguard report where money doesn't last, or 70% of assets don't last past the second generation, and we started Beck Bode now 13 years ago. If I was to fast forward 40 years from now or 30 years from now, and we ran this same study just on our clients, my goal would be to say that 100% of our clients, their wealth passed on past that second generation. And that's really what we're working towards, is to educate absolutely every single one of our clients, as well as their legacy or that next generation, on how to invest, how to plan, and a place to begin this process. So that's what we're working towards.
absolutely. And there's no minimum on these types of accounts. I think it's just important to start.
Right. So if you're one of those clients or a potential client that might want to get engaged with your children or your next generation, or figuring out where to start, we want to have that conversation. So appreciate everybody joining. Talking about building generational healthy saving habits is what we're doing here, and appreciate everyone for joining us today.
Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to seeing your questions come in. And the first one here is a 529 plan the right vehicle to start saving money at an early age?
Yeah, that's a great question. And sometimes what happens is we got to know a little bit more about the client, because some of it gets a little bit personalized. But let's talk about the benefit of a 529 and why they were created. The idea was a 529 plan was a place to put money that was specifically to be used for college, to pay for college expenses, that allowed for tax-free growth and a tax-free distribution, as long as, again, it was used for college purposes. And while on the surface this seems like, oh, that's great, I'm going to start plugging as much money into this as possible, the one thing that we want for our clients is as much flexibility as possible, right? So when I think of a 529 plan, you're putting rules on your money, which, as my mom knows, I don't always like rules or want to abide by rules. So any of our clients, I try to keep as much cash as flexible as possible. And inside of a 529 plan, they also tell you how that money can be invested. So you're limited on your investment options in there, which is more rules that I don't think we should have on our assets or our money that we want to invest. While it's great to think about tax-deferred growth, I start asking clients a lot of questions on, well, what if your kid wants a gap year? Or what if they get a scholarship? I mean, there's a lot of different ways we can pass money on and use it, but there's other ways you can accomplish the same thing with a 529 plan. And I know when I had kids, use an example of myself again, I know that family members wanted to make sure that money was being put away for college. So for the money that family members wanted to contribute, we created a small 529 plan for that purpose. For money that my wife and I wanted to set aside for college, we actually just saved it in a regular taxable savings account that left us the most flexibility. Now, when we go through the planning process for clients, the one thing we always talk about is save for yourself first. We've dealt with a lot of clients that are now in retirement, that are really, really proud that they paid for their child's education, but they're not as financially secure as they could be. Whether they refinanced a home or didn't save enough while their kids were in college, it was not a great long-term decision. And I want to do everything I possibly can for my kids, right? But I don't want that to be at the detriment of my own personal financial future. So I think when it comes down to what's the best savings vehicle for anybody, number one, it's going to be save for yourself first. Number two, it's how flexible can we make that money so that all of our goals can be accomplished.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. We could have a whole other discussion about 529 plans
Yeah.
as it is. And while they may serve a purpose somewhere in the plan, today's conversation about generational wealth and money habits too, it's really not going to be the primary vehicle that we're going to be recommending.
Right. Next question. So as we sit here on March 25th, the question is it too late to open up an IRA or a Roth IRA?
No, absolutely not. Again, for 2026, there's absolutely no rush, or you're not late to the party at all. You're actually in a unique scenario today if your child was, or you were working last year and had earned income, you can actually make a contribution for 2025. So if you worked during the year, you could make the full contribution of $7,500 for last year, and you can make a full contribution for 2026 as well. Yeah. So if you're looking at your income for last year or your child's income and they're going to exceed the $7,500 as one lump sum and you want to add more, you can make one for last year and this year. And we have until April 15th. So we're a little over 2 weeks away.
So we have time.
Yep.
You have time to still make a 2025 contribution. And how long does it take to open up the account and fund it?
I mean, with the team here, it will take a day or 2 days.
So plenty of time to make those contributions as long as you had earned income into a Roth IRA, if it's appropriate, as well as an IRA.
Yeah, if you reach out to the service team or you reach out to your advisor, it will happen quick.
All right, Vinny, so the next question is in, and it's, my child just started their first job. What is the best thing for them to do to get started on savings?
Sure, that's a great one actually. First thing is we want to have a conversation with them and look at all their opportunities. One, what is their employer offering? Do they have a 401k opportunity? Is there a match? What vehicles with inside the 401k is appropriate for them? What are their investment opportunities inside the 401k? And how can we structure that around a plan for them for the best success for their retirement? And then after that, yes is the answer. There may be an opportunity to open up a Roth account with us or a traditional IRA or another account that is also fulfilling the needs that they want. So it's not a quick yes or no question, but it's worth the conversation, and you should always be reviewing what your investments are like in your 401k and how your savings looks.
Again, it's a personal question on what's the best path forward. Part of the planning process helps decide what's the best savings vehicle for any client and into their future.
And I like this question a lot because it really does point out maybe in this case, the child hasn't even started the 401k yet. And maybe they're nervous about having that conversation or don't know who to go to. So I think that this is an important one where they can be directed to us, have a really good conversation, and we can take our time in educating them.
Great. Well, that wraps it up for the day. I appreciate everybody joining. Any questions that you have on anything that we've discussed today, or you want to talk about having a conversation with your next generation or your kids or opening up different accounts, we're here to help in any way possible. So thanks everybody, and we'll speak again soon.